In the early months of 2017, Don Vanderboom took notice when the newly minted Trump administration proclaimed loudly and clearly that religious liberty within federal government operations would once again be respected. In 8 years under the previous administration, a rash of White House executive orders, directives, and bureaucratic rules were used to press the hobnail boot of the LGBTQ movement and the abortion lobby against people with sincere biblical convictions, writes Jerry Pierce. Vanderboon knew it all too well. Some 18 months earlier, on a Monday morning in August 2015, Vanderboon drove to his West Michigan Beef Company in Hudsonville, a business he began in 2003 to provide for his family, create jobs for area residents, and bring glory to God in all we do. Upon arriving, Vanderboon quickly learned he had visitors, 2 inspectors from the Federal Department of Agriculture, waiting in his office with a grievance that had nothing to do with food safety. One of them held in his hand a pamphlet Vanderboon had quietly placed under the newspapers and magazines in his company's break room a few days earlier. The pamphlet explained, in a reasoned and kindly tone, Vanderboon says, what biblical marriage is and why gay marriage is counter to God's design for human beings. That summer, the Supreme Court had legalized gay marriage nationally, and the papers were full of celebratory articles about it, even though the Supreme Court has no right to actually make laws. That's Congress that has the right to do that. Vanderboon, a soft-spoken evangelical Christian with Midwestern sensibilities, thought his 45-plus employees deserved at least one other perspective. What Vanderboon didn't know was that the U.S. Department of Agriculture had issued a new policy about what constituted harassment following the Supreme Court ruling. The federal inspectors had flagged Vanderboon's pamphlet. They made me agree right there that I would not be putting that pamphlet back out, or else they would be pulling their inspectors from our facility, electively causing the company to shut down. Vanderboon explained in an interview with Decision magazine, following the federal officials' demands, Vanderboon says he walked on eggshells at his business while appealing to the Agriculture Department. But beyond learning that his case had been passed on to the department's Civil Rights Division in September 2015, he was stiff-armed by the agency for the remainder of the Obama presidency. Eventually, he got legal representation from Alliance Defending Freedom, which asked President Trump to remedy the situation. By late 2017, Vanderboon got relief through a Trump administration executive order on religious freedom and new federal agency rules. He could once again place religious literature in the break room of his business without fearing the federal government's wrath. Yet he worries the relief might be short-lived. A new administration can change it. That's the unfortunate fact. Vanderboon says, adding that a liberal progressive victory in November's presidential election could bring even harsher penalties than before. During Obama's tenure, the Affordable Care Act sought to coerce corporations and nonprofits into providing abortion and contraception coverage, that is, hormonal birth control, which is known to murder babies, irrespective of religious belief. Then, with the Supreme Court's abortiful gay marriage ruling, the pressure from the federal government on people of faith worsened. The Trump presidency has brought a reprieve. The federal government is no longer aiming to penalize religious Americans for opposing the left's social agenda, but those executive actions lack permanence. Eric Metaxas, best-selling author of If You Can Keep It, The Forgotten Promise of American Liberty, and an outspoken Christian and conservative, is concerned a victory for the left in November would do irreparable harm. There was a time, he says, when the Democratic Party wasn't dominated by leftists. Very sadly for the country, that day is gone, at least for now. So if the Democrats of today win control of the White House and both houses of Congress, we are in for a radical deconstruction of America from which we can never recover. Wesley J. Smith, a lawyer, ethicist, and senior fellow at the Discovery Institute's Center on Human Exceptionalism, says the disagreements among the parties that used to be over fiscal policy have morphed as the left has adopted a secularist view of humanity, where avoiding suffering and embracing pleasure are the highest cultural values, along with a globalist government, of course. This is all wicked. Our differences are fundamental. Either an unborn baby has moral value or he or she doesn't, Smith said. Either religious employers should have the right to pursue employment policies consistent with their faith missions, or they should be held to the same standards as secular employers to prevent discrimination. Unlike, say, determining whether the optimal and the maximum tax bracket is 30% or 40%, where the parties can come together in the middle, our differences today are the consequence of mutually exclusive and incompatible fundamental moral values. Basically, the globalist government, deep state, has infected the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party, but only in the past, as the Republican Party is now turning into a new brand of American exceptionalist celebration, and the Democratic Party is turning into a worse celebration of globalist values. Where executive orders and federal directives are transient, the actions of federal courts can be generational. An example in the 1973 Roe v. Wade abortion decision, but the Trump administration has seen remarkable success in the judiciary. Through mid-December of 2019, more than 170 of the president's federal judicial nominees, including 2 Supreme Court justices, had been confirmed. It is a hopeful sign that a federal bench, too often viewed by conservatives as left-leaning and activist, can regain its ability to function as arbiters of the Constitution. Franklin Graham has argued that the current administration provides a brief window of opportunity to set a different policy direction for the nation and a revived spiritual direction for the church. For the nation to flourish, both things are necessary, and Franklin has made the point that a president's ability to nominate federal judges has lasting consequences for a public consensus on morality. But no one in the field of progressive presidential candidates is friendly toward biblical values, nor to the idea that human rights are granted by God, nor not the state, says Ken Blackwell, Senior Fellow for Human Rights and Constitutional Governance at the Family Research Council. With a Democratic victory, Blackwell says not only would gains made in the courts be jeopardized, but as key religious liberty cases come up, but important gains in public policy would be imperiled, and we would see unprecedented pressure to squash religious liberty, the sanctity of human life, and the free enterprise system. The clarity of the choices, whether we continue down this path of respect for human rights, respect for religious liberty, and the right to life, economic expansion, and the value of work, or on the other hand, the path of bigger, more intrusive, and by definition more bureaucratic and ineffective government, it's a startling contrast, Blackwell says. Metatax has noted that Abraham Lincoln viewed America as a divine experiment, despite its failures, calling the nation the almost chosen people and the last best hope of the world. He understood better than anyone the outsized role that America has played and plays yet on the world stage. If we keep the republic and preserve American self-government, Metataxis says, we make it possible for that flame of liberty to spread to other parts of the globe, where they look to us for leadership. But such global leadership isn't possible without a recognition that American ideals are exceptional in human history. Metataxis says if the country follows the path the left is forging, we will destroy the free market and the state will become all-powerful. Such a country effectively will not be Christian or even friendly to Christians, but will become anti-Christian in place of worshiping the state. The forces of globalism and secularism will be given free rein as we have never seen, and the flame of liberty will flicker and sputter and eventually go out, because next up is the Great Tribulation on God's prophetic timeline according to the book of Revelation. I pray that God and his people never let that happen, that is, to let the U.S. fall. And, of course, in our time, we can do all we can to fight against such an event. Vanderboom, the Michigan business owner, is praying that too. And as the slogan goes, promises made, promises kept. These are just some of the promises made and kept by the current administration under Donald J. Trump. Reinstated and expanded the Mexico City policy. Transgender bathroom directive for public schools removed. Neil Gorsuch, a conservative judge, installed. Executive order on religious freedom acknowledged its constitutionally guaranteed place in American democracy. Conscience exemptions to the Obamacare contraceptive abortifacient mandate. The U.S. Embassy opening in Jerusalem. The U.S. State Department held its first ever ministerial to advance religious freedom. Brett Kavanaugh, another conservative judge, installed. The First Step Act, helping criminal justice reform, was made. The HHS expanded the enforcement of federal conscience laws and established a new conscience and religious freedom division as part of its HHS's Office of Civil Rights. And speech on the importance of religious freedom was made by President Trump before the United Nations, a first attempt at such a thing, while announcing a U.S. policy initiative to promote global religious freedom. And, of course, there was the 170 Trump-nominated judges around the country as well. That is just some of them. If anyone wondered, that is Donald Trump, the conservative Christian president we've so wanted for so long. Let us not waste this time. Bring him into office again. Keep the help going that the Lord is giving us, and keep this brief window of opportunity going for more evangelism and current living in this life that we have under the freedom of the United States of America. if you're in the USA.